In the sacred silence of evening, when shadows lengthen and the world grows still, many find themselves face to face with an unwelcome companion, restlessness that seems to emerge from nowhere. Perhaps you recognize this feeling, the subtle tremor of unease that creeps into your awareness, transforming peaceful moments into landscapes of worry. If you've ever wondered why tranquility sometimes feels so elusive, or why your mind seems determined to conjure troubles that may never come to pass, know that you're not alone in this experience. More importantly, understand that this inner turbulence doesn't signal weakness or inadequacy. It's simply the human condition, and within Buddhist understanding lies a profound path toward healing. The nature of inner storms. Anxiety, from the lens of Buddhist wisdom, is not a flaw in our design or an enemy to be battled into silence. It is, rather, a quiet messenger, often misunderstood, bearing within it deep and sacred truths. Like all forms of suffering, it calls our attention not to what is wrong with us, but to what is true about the nature of life itself. In the ancient teachings of the Buddha, there is a word that echoes through centuries with unshakable relevance: dukkha. Often translated as suffering, dissatisfaction, or unease, dukkha is not a mistake in the system. It is the system until we learn to see clearly. It is the friction born from clinging to the fleeting, grasping for stability in a world built on change. It arises when we try to solidify what is fluid, to possess what must eventually pass, to demand guarantees from a life that offers none. This understanding isn't a bleak surrender, but a liberating insight. It invites us to stop waging war against the tides of our experience and begin to understand their rhythm. When we recognize that much of our anxiety stems not from the world itself, but from our resistance to its nature, we begin to wake up. Think of how anxiety often arises, from trying to predict the unpredictable, control the uncontrollable, or anchor ourselves in a reality that constantly shifts. We imagine conversations that may never take place. We brace ourselves for losses that have not occurred. We attempt to solve future problems with a mind tangled in what-ifs and maybe-somedays. Our thoughts travel compulsively between the echoes of yesterday and the shadows of tomorrow, dragging us away from the only place where peace is ever possible, the present moment. This mental time travel may seem protective, even necessary, but it often comes at a cost: disconnection from the here and now, the only place where our feet truly touch the ground. From the Buddhist perspective, this disconnection is the core of our distress. The mind's desperate search for safety pulls us away from the stillness that is always available beneath the noise. But what if, instead of resisting anxiety, we listened to it? What if we held space for it, not to indulge it, but to understand it? What if we allowed it to teach us that our craving for control, for permanence, for certainty, is the root from which so much suffering grows? Buddhism doesn't offer a quick fix for anxiety. It offers something far more radical, a complete reorientation of our relationship to experience. It teaches us that by leaning into the discomfort, by observing it without judgment, breathing with it, befriending it, we can begin to transform it. We no longer see anxiety as a storm to hide from, but as a signal. Here is where you're attached. Here is where you're afraid. Here is where you're still holding on. And in seeing clearly, we begin to let go. We learn to return, again and again, to this breath, this step, this moment. Not because the future disappears, but because it no longer holds us hostage. We become less entangled in our projections and more anchored in presence. And from that grounded presence, peace slowly blooms, not in the absence of anxiety, but in the space where anxiety is seen, understood, and ultimately released. The illusion of separation. At the heart of Buddhist wisdom lies a profound truth. Much of our suffering does not arise from the events of life themselves, but from a fundamental misperception of who we are. We grow up believing that we are separate, isolated units of consciousness sealed inside skin and bone, cast into a vast, indifferent universe, alone, vulnerable, small. This illusion of separateness becomes the breeding ground for fear. Fear of rejection, because we believe we must earn love from the outside. Fear of failure, because our worth seems to hinge on performance. Fear of death, because we think the end of the body is the end of the self. And so we live clenched, guarding ourselves, performing for approval, planning for survival. Beneath it all lies a single, haunting question. What if I am not enough? But Buddhist contemplative traditions invite us to look more closely, not at the stories the mind tells, but at the direct experience of being. And when we do, something astonishing is revealed. We are not as separate as we once believed. The boundary between self and other begins to soften. You are not an island. You are part of an infinite, living web. The breath you take in now is the same air that once passed through trees, animals, lovers, and strangers. The water in your cells once moved through oceans and rain clouds and rivers long forgotten. The emotions that stir in your chest, your grief, your joy, your anxiety, are not uniquely yours. They are part of a vast human inheritance. They are echoes of what it means to be alive. Your thoughts arise not in isolation but from conditions, culture, language, memory, biology, ancestral trauma, and countless interactions. Even your sense of I, the observer behind the eyes, is not a fixed entity but a process, a dance of perception constantly shifting. Buddhism calls this anatta, the not-self. It doesn't mean you don't exist. It means you are not separate, not solid, not independent of all that is. And in this recognition, a gentle liberation begins. Because if you are not separate, then your anxiety is not a flaw to be hidden, but a bridge to others. It is a doorway to empathy. It connects you to the great ocean of beings who, like you, tremble under the weight of uncertainty. Who, like you, long for safety, love, and peace. You are not the only one who has ever lain awake at night fearing the future. You are not the only one who has ever felt like they're falling behind or falling apart. You are part of the great human unfolding. And when we truly begin to grasp this, when we feel it in our bones, not just understand it with the mind, anxiety starts to lose its isolating grip. We no longer see it as proof that we are broken. We see it as evidence that we care, that we are alive, that we are human. From this place, healing becomes possible, not by erasing anxiety, but by holding it with tenderness, by offering it space, not shame, by saying, "Ah, here you are again. You too belong." This is the sacred paradox. The more we turn toward our fear with compassion, the less power it holds over us. The more we let go of the illusion of a separate self, the more supported we feel by life itself. You are not alone. You never were. And that truth, that deep, abiding truth, may be the most comforting medicine of all. The practice of witnessing, one of the most liberating teachings in Buddhism, one that quietly reshapes the entire experience of being human, is this. You are not your thoughts. You are not your emotions. You are not the turbulence that sometimes storms through your inner world. This may seem simple, even obvious, but when truly understood, it becomes revolutionary. You can feel anxiety without becoming an anxious person. You can encounter sadness without wearing it as your identity. You can experience anger, restlessness, fear, even despair, without allowing them to define who you are. This subtle but profound shift is the beginning of freedom. In the traditional teachings, this is the cultivation of sati, mindful awareness, not a passive state, but a powerful attentiveness rooted in clarity and compassion. It is the ability to witness your mental and emotional states as they arise and pass, without being swept away by them. Like watching clouds drift across the sky, you begin to recognize that your thoughts are not facts, your feelings are not final. They are phenomena, temporary, conditioned, and always moving. When anxiety arises, instead of tightening around it, instead of clinging to the storyline it weaves, you simply pause, you breathe, you observe, and you gently name it. Ah, here is unease. Here is the mind forecasting harm that has not yet come. Here is fear, arising, peaking, softening. This doesn't mean you numb yourself or pretend to be calm. It means you make space. You allow, you turn toward the storm, not to be consumed by it, but to understand its nature. And in doing so, you create a subtle, powerful gap, a space between the watcher and what is being watched, a space wide enough to choose, to respond, not react. The practice isn't about suppressing your thoughts or silencing your emotions. That would be like standing in a river and commanding it to stop flowing. Instead, the practice is about stepping out of the current just enough to realize that you are not the river, you are the one watching it pass. And over time, with patience and care, you begin to develop a new relationship to your inner world. Where once you were drowning in waves of thought, you now begin to float. You learn that even the strongest currents can be navigated, not through resistance but through understanding. Just as a skilled swimmer learns not to thrash against the water but to move with it, you too learn that your emotions, your thoughts, your sensations, however intense, can become workable. They no longer hold the same power to drag you under because you no longer mistake them for the whole of who you are. This is not detachment in the cold sense, it is loving awareness. It is intimacy without entanglement. It is the art of being present with all of yourself, your joy and sorrow, your hopes and fears, without collapsing into any of it. And slowly, this presence becomes your anchor. Not perfection, not control, but presence. The winds of anxiety may still blow, the storms of fear may still rise, but you remain grounded in the knowing. This too is a passing cloud. This too is not me. This too belongs and will pass. In this way, mindfulness becomes not just a practice, but a refuge, a quiet sanctuary within you that nothing can disturb. And from that refuge, healing flows, not because the pain disappears, but because it is finally seen with gentle, fearless eyes. The medicine of acceptance. In much of Western culture, anxiety is viewed as an intruder, a glitch in the system, a problem to be solved, a disorder to be cured. It is medicalized, pathologized, and often seen as something to be eliminated as quickly as possible. But Buddhism invites a radically different perspective, one that doesn't diminish the reality of anxiety, but transforms our relationship to it. What if anxiety isn't brokenness, but a breakthrough waiting to happen? What if it isn't a malfunction, but a message, a signal that something within you is reaching toward understanding, toward awakening? Buddhist wisdom teaches that suffering is not an obstacle to the path, it is the path. The discomfort you feel, the agitation that grips your chest, the racing thoughts, these are not signs of failure. They are signs of aliveness. They are the very places where your deepest growth is unfolding. But to walk this path, we must first change our posture. We must stop running from what we feel and begin to turn toward it. This is where acceptance comes in. Not as resignation, not as passivity, but as a sacred act of courage. Acceptance means no longer exhausting yourself by resisting what is already here. It means laying down the armor, even for a moment, and allowing yourself to feel what you feel without judgment. It means saying, "This too is part of my experience. This too belongs." When you stop wrestling with anxiety, something remarkable happens. The energy that was bound up in resistance becomes available for more skillful, compassionate responses. You begin to see that you can feel fear without letting it control you. You can recognize uncertainty without needing to escape it. You can honor your anxiety without collapsing into it. This doesn't make you weak, it makes you wise. And just as important, this acceptance must extend to yourself. Because for many who suffer with anxiety, there is a second hidden layer of pain. The belief that they are somehow flawed for feeling this way. The shame, the self-judgment, the silent question, what's wrong with me? But Buddhist compassion cuts through this illusion. It reminds us that you are not broken, you are human. You are not failing, you are feeling, you are not weak, you are waking up. Imagine for a moment a frightened child, trembling, confused, overwhelmed. Would you scold that child? Would you tell them to toughen up, to get over it? Of course not. You would bend down, you would soften your voice, you would hold them not because they needed fixing, but because they needed love. This is how Buddhism invites you to treat yourself, not with indulgence, but with deep, unwavering care, with gentleness, with respect, with patience. Because only in that space of compassion can true healing begin. And here's the paradox. It is not by trying to get rid of anxiety that we become free from it. It is by no longer fearing it, by no longer defining ourselves by it, by meeting it, breath by breath, with the quiet strength of awareness and the soft light of compassion. In the end, Buddhism doesn't promise a life without anxiety. It offers something far more powerful: the ability to face anxiety without abandoning yourself, to walk through your fear and still remain whole, to feel the tremble and still take the next step, not in spite of anxiety but with it, as a companion, as a teacher, as a doorway to something deeper than fear, your own boundless heart. If this message resonates with you, and you're seeking more moments of peace and insight, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for daily reflections rooted in ancient wisdom and modern clarity. The power of impermanence. Perhaps Buddhism's greatest gift to those experiencing anxiety is the teaching of impermanence. Everything that arises must also pass away. This includes not only external circumstances, but internal states as well. The anxiety you feel in this moment, no matter how overwhelming, is already beginning to change. Understanding impermanence doesn't minimize present pain, but places it in context. Just as storms eventually clear, leaving the sky pristine and peaceful, emotional turbulence naturally subsides when we don't feed it with resistance or identification. You can anchor yourself in this truth during difficult moments. This feeling is temporary. This state will shift. I am larger than any single emotion passing through me. A new relationship with fear. Rather than seeing anxiety as a sign of weakness or a personal failure, Buddhist wisdom offers a powerful reframe. What if anxiety is not your enemy, but your teacher? What if, instead of trying to silence or suppress it, you approached it with curiosity, compassion, and a willingness to listen? What is this unease trying to communicate? Often, anxiety arises not from nowhere, but from areas where we are clinging, grasping tightly to desired outcomes, to control, to certainty in a world that offers none. It may also arise where we're avoiding some inner truth, resisting necessary change, or staying small when something within us longs to grow. The discomfort, the racing heart, the restless mind, they may be signals, not of failure, but of misalignment, of something in your inner world asking to be seen. And here lies the quiet brilliance of the Buddhist view. Anxiety is not the problem, it's the messenger. And like all messengers, its value is not in how it delivers the message, but in the truth it carries. Look beneath the noise of anxiety and you may find something tender and true. That nervousness before a difficult conversation, it points to your longing for honesty, for harmony, for connection. That fear of failure, it reveals your deep desire to grow, to contribute, to live a life of meaning. That persistent worry about someone you love, it shows the immensity of your heart, your capacity to care. Seen through this lens, anxiety is not proof of dysfunction. It is evidence of sensitivity, of conscience, of depth. It shows that something matters to you, that you are awake to life's uncertainty and beauty, its vulnerability and its stakes. But to access this deeper message, you must first step back from anxiety's dramatic presentation. Because anxiety rarely speaks in a calm voice, it often arrives as tightness in the chest, catastrophizing thoughts, or a flood of adrenaline. It screams in what-ifs, in imagined disasters, in worst-case scenarios. But beneath the drama lies a quieter voice, a voice of wisdom asking to be heard. The practice is learning to pause, to breathe, to say, something is arising in me. Let me listen, not react. To sit with the discomfort, not as a victim or a critic, but as a student. Ask gently, what am I afraid of losing? What am I clinging to? What value is being threatened? What truth am I avoiding? Over time, anxiety becomes less of a wall and more of a doorway, not a signal to run, but a signal to look deeper. This shift doesn't make anxiety disappear, but it does transform its power. No longer an overwhelming force, it becomes an invitation to know yourself more fully, to live more honestly, to choose more wisely. And in this transformation, you may come to see that your anxiety is not separate from your wisdom, but intricately woven into it. Like a flame that burns because it longs to illuminate, your anxiety burns because something within you longs to live authentically, love deeply, act meaningfully. It is not here to break you down, it is here to break you open. The path forward. Buddhist teachings don't promise a life free from all distress. Such a promise would be neither honest nor helpful. Instead, they offer something more valuable, the possibility of moving through difficulty with greater wisdom, compassion, and skill. The journey begins with this moment, wherever you find yourself. Whether sitting in a comfortable chair reading these words or lying awake at 3 a.m. with a racing heart, you can begin practicing right now. Notice your breath. Feel your body's contact with whatever supports it. Acknowledge any anxiety present without judgment, as you might acknowledge a nervous friend who's come to visit. Remember that healing happens not through dramatic transformations, but through countless small moments of mindful awareness. Each time you remember to breathe consciously, each time you treat yourself with kindness, each time you return to the present moment, you're walking the path of liberation. Your anxiety doesn't make you broken. Your sensitivity doesn't make you weak. Your humanity, with all its beautiful complexity and occasional turbulence, is not a mistake to be corrected, but a gift to be honored. Within Buddhist wisdom lies the radical understanding that you are already whole, already worthy, already home, even when you feel most lost. The path continues with your next breath, your next step, your next choice to meet this moment with awareness rather than avoidance. In this way, what once seemed like an obstacle becomes a doorway, and what felt like suffering transforms into the very ground of awakening.